So today we're diving into this legal battle that pits one homeowner directly against her homeowners association. And, on the surface, it looks like a pretty clear-cut case of mismanagement. But, as we're about to find out, in the eyes of the law, things are almost never that simple.
So what happens when you sue your HOA? I mean, it's a question a lot of homeowners have probably asked themselves at some point, right? Like when you feel your board is just not doing its job, what can you actually do? And more importantly, what does it really take to win that fight? Well, we're about to see.
Okay, so listen to this. Your Honor, my name is Marilyn, and I filed the HR petition to resolve 4 legal issues. Those are the words that kicked off an administrative hearing back on July 16, 2025. The woman speaking is Marilyn Fogelsong, and what's really interesting here is that she's not just any homeowner. She's a former president of her own HOA board. She's representing herself, and she is ready to go.
So, where does all this go down? We're talking about the Park Townhouses in Tucson, Arizona. And, this isn't some huge, sprawling suburban neighborhood. We're talking about a tiny 8-unit community. That small scale really makes this whole thing feel way more intense, way more personal.
Now, something you gotta realize is that taking on your HOA isn't cheap. Marilyn shelled out $2,000. That's $2,000 out of her own pocket just to get this hearing. It was $500 for each of the 4 issues she wanted to argue. That's a serious chunk of change for anyone.
All right, let's get into the meat of it. What exactly was Marilyn's case against her HOA? She laid out 4 really specific allegations, and each one seems to point to this pattern of serious mismanagement, maybe even some legal violations. Honestly, when you first hear it, it sounds like a total slam dunk.
So her case was basically built on these 4 big claims. First, an unlawful conflict of interest with the management company. Second, violations of the community's own rules, the CC&Rs. Third, breaking open meeting laws. And finally, a general failure by the board to act in good faith. Let's break down what she was arguing for each of these.
Okay, so first up is this conflict of interest thing. The board hired this management company, TRT, but here's the catch. TRT also worked privately for 2 of the board members, and Marilyn alleged this was causing huge problems. She claimed TRT wasn't handing over parking fines it collected for the HOA, and even tried to stick the whole community with a legal bill for a private matter. Not good.
And her other claims? They pretty much painted this same picture of a board that had gone totally rogue. She said they were violating the community's own rulebook, the CC&Rs, which stands for Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. For instance, she said the board was planning to paint individual townhouses, which she argued was way outside their authority, since the HOA is only supposed to deal with common areas. She also accused them of holding secret meetings without telling anyone, and then just ignoring her when she asked for official documents like meeting minutes. And to top it all off, she claimed they just weren't doing their basic jobs, managing the bank account, paying bills, or even just replacing a dead tree.
So you've got Marilyn laying out this incredibly detailed case, right? She's got documents, she has her own experience as a former board president, and then comes the big twist. When it's actually time for the hearing, the HOA is a no-show. They and their lawyers just don't show up to defend themselves. I mean, at this point, you're thinking, case closed, right?
Yeah, with a whole list of serious allegations, and the other side not even bothering to show up, the outcome seems like a no-brainer. But this is exactly where this story takes a really sharp, unexpected turn.
Yeah. Despite everything, all the claims, the evidence she brought, the fact the HOA didn't even appear, the judge denied her petition. All 4 of her claims were rejected, and the big question is, how? Why?
Well, the answer is buried in the nitty-gritty details of the law and in the judge's final decision. See, this wasn't about who was morally right. It was about who could prove their case based on very specific legal standards. So let's break down how her case, which seemed so strong, just fell apart, one issue at a time.
Okay, remember that conflict of interest claim with the management company? Marilyn pointed to a specific Arizona law, but the judge looked at it and said, nope. That law only applies when a board member or their close relative personally benefits from a contract. It doesn't cover a situation where a separate company they use also gets a contract. So her claim just didn't fit the precise legal definition in the statute she was using.
All right, what about the CC&R violation with the painting project? That seemed like a clear case of the board overstepping. But here's where her case hit a wall. Incomplete evidence. The judge pointed out that Marilyn had only submitted bits and pieces of the governing documents, not the complete set of CC&Rs and bylaws. Without the full documents as official evidence, the judge basically had no way to know what the rules actually were, so he couldn't rule that they'd been broken.
And the secret meetings? Well, the judge found that for one of the main meetings, an email notice was sent to the co-owner of her property, who happened to be her son. Legally speaking, that meant the property unit got notice, so the law was satisfied. And another meeting that didn't have notice, it was considered an emergency, which is a legal exception. So again, her claim got shot down by the specifics of the law.
And her last claim about the board not acting in good faith? This one failed because of a really important legal idea: jurisdiction. Basically, being in the wrong court. Marilyn used a law that deals with how corporate directors should behave, but the judge said that this particular administrative court only had the power to rule on laws about planned communities, not that specific corporate law. In other words, she might have had a valid claim, but she filed it in the wrong place.
So as you see each one of her arguments get taken apart on these technical and procedural grounds, this central theme starts to emerge. It all boils down to one of the most fundamental principles in our entire legal system: the burden of proof.
In a civil case like this one, the standard of proof is called preponderance of the evidence. It's a fancy term, but what it means is that the person bringing the lawsuit, the petitioner, has the entire responsibility to convince the judge that there's a greater than 50% chance that their claim is true, both factually and legally. The other side doesn't have to prove they're innocent. In fact, as we saw here, they don't even have to show up.
So here's the real takeaway from all this. Marilyn Fogelsong didn't lose because she was necessarily wrong. She lost because she failed to meet her burden of proof. Her case is a perfect example of why just feeling like you've been wronged isn't enough. You have to present a claim that fits the exact wording of the law, you have to back it up with complete and proper evidence, and you have to file it in the right court. If any one of those pieces is missing, your whole case can crumble.
And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. Marilyn spent $2,000 and a ton of time and energy to make her case, only to watch it fall apart on legal technicalities. It's a powerful reminder to ask ourselves in any legal fight, what's the difference between being right and actually being able to prove it?